Worldwide, the number of people living with depression rose by roughly 50% between 1990 and 2017.
In response to that surge, our primary intervention model has relied on the logic laid down by Sigmund Freud in the 1890s. To put that timeline in perspective, the 1890s was an era when you steered an automobile by pushing a wooden stick called a tiller. We eventually updated the car, but in therapy, the standard operating procedure still involves excavating a patient's personal history, assigning a subjective diagnostic label, and relying on observational guesswork rather than objective tracking. You cannot manage a global emotional health crisis without concrete client-generated data. Without measurement, failure is the only outcome. Look at the statistics where the stakes are highest. Between 2004 and 2008, military suicides in the U.S. Army spiked by 80%. Today, veteran suicide rates sit at nearly double that of the civilian population. The system tasked with treating these issues is failing at scale. For decades, the medical establishment offered a simple explanation for these numbers: a chemical imbalance in the brain, specifically low serotonin. This theory became the bedrock of modern psychiatry, used to justify millions of prescriptions. But this document, a massive 2022 umbrella review published in Molecular Psychiatry, examined the foundational evidence behind that theory. The researchers concluded there is, quote, no consistent evidence that depression is caused by decreased serotonin activity. The legacy system relies on a 130-year-old foundation, prescribing medications based on a biological mechanism that the establishment's own research has now invalidated. It is improvising rather than addressing the actual drivers of human behavior. True emotional and physical health cannot be achieved through continuous symptom management. It requires a deliberate, engineered architecture. This diagram illustrates subconscious restructuring, or SR. It is a precise, 7-pillar framework developed to replace that collapsed legacy system. Every component you see here is explicitly defined and actively measured. There is a strict structural law to this model. All 7 pillars are required. If you remove even one of them, the entire architecture fails. The first pillar is the psychological mechanism. Most behavioral therapies treat thoughts and emotions as if they spontaneously generate. They do not. This flowchart maps out exactly how the subconscious processes information. It follows a predictable sequence. An internal or external word evokes a picture. That picture generates an emotional state, and that emotional state dictates your behavior. SR trains you to intervene early. You interrupt that sequence at the word level, restructure the mental picture, and by doing so, you directly reprogram the resulting emotion before the behavior happens. But psychology is only half the equation. The second pillar is the gut barrier and microbiome. Your intestinal wall is 1 cell thick, and it acts as the body's largest interface with the outside world, lined with roughly 500 million neurons. When the tight junction proteins locking those cells together fail, you get a condition known as leaky gut. As this schematic shows, the compromised barrier allows toxic microbial fragments, like lipopolysaccharides or LPS, to breach the gut lining and enter your bloodstream. Those LPS fragments circulate and eventually cross the blood-brain barrier. Once inside the brain, they activate microglia, triggering a cascade of neuroinflammation that is directly linked to major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety, and PTSD. No amount of traditional talk therapy is going to resolve an emotional disorder when a physical breach in your gut barrier is actively pumping inflammatory toxins into your brain. That brings us to Pillar 3, objective-driven nutrition. The foundation of this system is a flexible carnivore diet, primarily meat, fish, eggs, and cheese. These foods provide the precise biological building blocks needed to repair the gut wall. If you look at the blue section here, you'll see the rule for eating anything outside that base code. Every food must serve a defined biological objective.
Roasted seaweed is included because it breaks down harmful bacterial biofilms. Organic tomato paste makes the cut because its lycopene kills cancer cells. If a food doesn't have a biological job, it is excluded. Conversely, the orange section outlines the system corruptors. You eliminate foods that drive insulin resistance and severely restrict oxalates, compounds found in plants like spinach and almonds. Capping total daily oxalates at 150 milligrams prevents these sharp crystals from physically scoring your intestinal lining. Pillar 4 is integrity. In this architecture, telling the truth is not a moral issue, it is a strict physiological requirement. Fabricating an alternate reality demands immense computational power from your nervous system. At the exact moment a lie is spoken, your body braces for exposure. It floods your system with cortisol and pushes your neurochemistry into a defensive state that damages the gut lining.
To protect yourself from this physiological stress, you have a biological shield consisting of exactly 3 options. You can tell the truth, you can overshare, or you can decline to answer. If you continuously poison the system with toxic nutritional inputs and chronic dishonesty, biological restoration is physically impossible. Pillar 5 is measurement and data tracking. Any medical architecture operating without objective data is just an opinion. SR rigorously tracks 17 specific emotional psychometrics, including anxiety, anger, and hopelessness, plus gut health at every single session. The client generates this outcome data themselves, replacing subjective diagnostic labels with hard, trackable numbers. Next is Pillar 6, self-image. As this graphic illustrates, your subconscious operates like a targeting system. It requires a deliberately engineered destination to work toward. If your self-image is undefined or inherited from past trauma, your psychological output will remain chaotic. Finally, Pillar 7 is the transformation. Operating purely in the daylight of conscious awareness is insufficient for permanent behavioral change. This is a daily neural protocol that opens direct access to the subconscious. It takes the rules, nutrition, and integrity from the other 6 pillars and writes them directly into the operating system of the mind. In the destructive loop, chronic lying spikes your cortisol. That stress destroys the gut barrier, releasing LPS fragments into the blood. Those toxins drive neuroinflammation, which deepens clinical depression and fuels negative false self-talk. But you can reverse this. Strict integrity, objective nutrition, and interrupting that psychological sequence act as circuit breakers. They seal the intestinal barrier, clear the inflammation, and stabilize the mind. Mechanism: gut, nutrition, integrity, measurement, self-image, transformation. 7 interlocking pillars. The choice is straightforward. You can remain dependent on a legacy system that medicates symptoms while ignoring its own failure data, or you can adopt a fully measurable architecture that engineers both emotional and biological fitness directly from the root mechanism up.